What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host, the Martian, also known as John, here to talk about this week's UFC event going down this Saturday from the Apex, headlined by Carlos Prates versus Neil Magny in a welterweight main event, along with 11 other fights, 12 fights in total. Those will be starting at 4 p.m. Eastern this Saturday, and we're going to talk about all those fights and bets for all 12 fights in just a moment here, but just a quick recap of last week. We're just kind of breezing through what happened, kind of a synopsis of the bets. Worst thing that could ever happen on an MMA podcast is like they talk about the fights from last week for more than 2 minutes. I think 2 minutes is the maximum you should talk about the fights from last week, so keep that in mind. But overall, I would say it was somewhere in between an okay and a good week. I don't really keep track of official tracked wagers anymore, but I did give out, I think, a good amount of winners, and I think they would slightly outweigh the losers on the card. So first fight on the card, we had the split decision prop at plus 225, Jamie Lynn Hort. That one won. I did advise on some winning bets in the next three fights, although I didn't officially endorse them, but Cody Gibson by decision, the GTD in that fight, and the GTD in the City Armfield fight. I mentioned those all as three good bets. The worst bet on the card for me, Rodrigo Nascimento money line. That was horrible. Victor Henry money line. That one came up short. I'm undecided about if that was a decent bet or not. Ayman Zahabi money line cash very easily. The GTD and the Stolfutz Barrio fight, obviously that went down in flames. Another huge banger on this card, the highlight of the card, Jasmine moneyline came through for me, and round 3 at plus 1,600 odds. That was a big prop winner on the card. The Machado sub decision came up short. Rose Namajunas moneyline came up short, and Brandon Moreno Albazi to end by split decision did not hit and didn't really have a chance. So the Jasmine fight in the round 3 prop really pushed that card into a really good event for me, and was happy with that coming through. And that's it. We're done with last week. Under 2 minutes, cash it, and let's start talking about the 12 fights going on this week from the UFC Apex. I'm excited for this card. I wasn't too excited for the last card, but I like the Apex, man. I mean, it's a terrible venue. The fights really aren't good, but I think they're the best fights to bet on and to profit from, and that's really what I care about the most at the end of the day. So we're getting into these 12 fights, and I'm excited for this first one, and I have some wagers on this one. Women's Bantamweight Division, Melissa Mullins, Claudia-Sygula. Odds for this one, Mullins as the favorite, minus 260, with Sygula coming back at plus 196. So I'm going to refresh everyone's memory on the podcast about the term role player. This is a term that I've coined for MMA, and I see some people using it, and unfortunately, I very rarely see the word used correctly. A role player is a fighter that had a bunch of easy fights, typically a bunch of wins and finishes in low-level promotions, and then they work their way up into the MMA competition, and they don't even realize how outskilled they are, how outmatched they are. We see fighters like Anali Yang is a great example. She had like 20 wins in China just armbarring women, which were essentially amateur jiu-jitsu matches, and by the time she got to the UFC, she had no idea what she was in for. It was like she was competing in a completely different sport, and that's what a role player is. It's not just any bad fighter. It's a fighter that manipulated their way to the UFC in a sense, and now they're they have a rude awakening. And we're gonna have some more of them on this card. So Claudia-Sygula is a role player. She is not a real fighter, and not that Melissa Mullins is some juggernaut that is going to make this a minus 1,000 type of matchup, but I think that she's clearly the more experienced, skilled fighter, and she has a huge grappling advantage in this fight. And I think that based on what I've seen from Sygula fights, the one fight where she lost, she got head and arm throwed, she got controlled from the scarfold, she got submitted with a scarfold arm lock, which is a terrible submission to get submitted with. I just think that if Mullins gets on top here, she's probably going to dominate and to either get a ground and pound finish or a sub finish. And Mullins' wrestling isn't fantastic, but I do think that this fight is going to eventually end up on the floor, and I think Mullins might only need one top position to convert a finish. So I like Mullins ITD at plus 275. And I like a little bit on her sub line at plus 1,000 as well. About a unit risked spread across those two bets with about 80% of the bet on the ITD line. So let's hope Mullins can get the sub for the cherry on top, but I'll take a ground and pound TKO as well. I am picking her to win by finish due to the grappling disparity between the two. Next fight is a premier fight in the a premier division fight, one of 3 on this card, so that's a really good ratio. 25% of the fights on the card are in the premier division. Tresean Gore, Antonio Trocoli. Odds for this one have Gore minus 170, Trocoli plus 145. Man, these guys fucking suck. Both of these guys are such bums, and I just can't lay juice on Tresean Gore. I mean, Gore is coming off of 2 pullouts, a wrist injury, a shoulder injury, so he hasn't fought in 2 years. He got knocked out by Cody Brundage, and I think the guy's gas tank is just really bad. I think that he slows down considerably in fights. I don't think he really knows how to pace himself, and the layoff, the injury, the fact that he's only had 6 pro fights, I just couldn't imagine getting behind this guy. I do think he probably has more ways to win the fight, and I agree with him being a slight favorite, but I'm still not going to wager any money on him. And Trocoli, I think, seems pretty limited to winning the fight with his grappling. I imagine the striking should favor the better boxer with the better jab in Tresean Gore. But if Trocoli can, make this fight dirty, ugly, get it in the clinch, get it to the grappling, extend it past a round, I think his chances of winning, a grappling-based fight here aren't, out of the realm of possibilities. And, I did mention that Gore's cardio sucks. It does. But I also could see this one turning into like a really gassy, bum fight. Well, it's going to be a bum fight from the jump, but I could see these guys both being really tired in the second and third round, and neither has the gas to finish one another. So the GTD at plus money is the only bet that catches my eye, but I cannot get behind endorsing any wagers on this fight. This is just a really good fight to skip out on, and we're going to move on. I'll pick Trocoli by decision there, honestly, though. That'll be the pick. Cody Stamann, Stamman-Blackshear, odds for this one. Blackshear, solid favorite, minus 260. Stamann plus 220 on the other side. I think this line is probably fine, honestly. I mean, this fight is likely to have a good amount of grappling in it. And I think, honestly, even though Cody has the better wrestling background, Damon is easily the better grappler of the two, has the better jiu-jitsu. And if Cody takes him down, I could see Damon reversing or getting a submission attempt off his back. And I just think Damon is the much, fresher fighter of the two. I think Cody is probably past his prime, honestly. The guy isn't really, old. He's only 34, but he's also been in the UFC for quite a while now, and I just think that you can considerably rate that he has fallen off in his recent fights, and I just don't think the guy has it in him anymore, honestly. So I'll be going with Damon to win the fight, likely by decision. His sub prop, I believe it's at 450. It's tempting. If it were closer to maybe 6 or 7, I think I would go in with a bet on it. But 450 isn't great, but man, this fight is going to feature a lot of grappling. And as I said in the beginning, I believe Blackshear is the considerably better submission grappler of the two. And Stamann has been submitted several times before, so would definitely not knock a play on Damon by sub. That seems like the only wager I would be interested in the fight. But Damon also did get a TKO, ground and pound TKO a couple of fights ago versus Lacerda. So any type of ground-related finish for Blackshear is within the realm here. So hopefully he can get the sub, cash some plus money tickets for some people out there. Speaking of sub props, we're moving on to the next fight in the welterweight division. Charles Radtke taking on Semelsberger. Odds for this one have Radtke minus 170, Semelsberger plus 145. And if Radtke approaches this fight intelligently, he could definitely cover this price because Radtke is actually a very skilled grappler, even though you wouldn't necessarily know it as watching his fights. I think he kind of has fallen in love with his hands a little bit, and his wrestling is not that great, but this guy has actually a ton of pro jiu-jitsu experience, and make no mistake, Semelsberger is horrible once he gets stuck on bottom. So if Radtke can, go approach this fight efficiently and hit those takedowns, he has potential to make it look easy. I just don't think he's going to. I think Radtke at 9-4 with how minimally he's reliably wrestled in his career, I can't get behind laying the juice here. It's not like Semelsberger is even going to dominate this fight when it's on the feet. I honestly think Radtke has potential to win the striking, and Semelsberger doesn't push a high pace on the feet. He's kind of a low volume boxer. He has power in his hands, but he just can't keep the fight standing. He hurts guys and they take him down, and he actually did a pretty good job popping back up to his feet and getting up from a lot of takedowns versus Preston Parsons. I think Preston Parsons has better wrestling and cardio and grit than Charles Radtke does. But Radtke, I believe, has the better top control than Preston Parsons. So I think Radtke's potential to make those those takedown more worthy than Preston Parsons did. So as I said, coming into this fight, the sub prop here at plus 650, I believe, is what Radtke's sub is at. That interests me because if he's taking the most easy path to victory here with the takedowns, I think the sub prop at just less than 16%, I believe, 1 divided by 6, right? Yep. Just less than 16%. I think that could be the only play I like here is Radtke sub. So moving on. Welterweight division, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos taking on Zaleski-Scroggin. Odds for this one have Zaleski huge favorite, minus 850 over Scroggin, plus 575. Did not look into Scroggin at all. I just know that he's not going to win this fight. His strength of schedule sucks. He's only been pro for a few years, and he's coming in this fight on 4 or 5 days' notice. I just fully do not believe he's going to win this fight, and this is probably going to be a squash match for an old but great fighter in Zaleski dos Santos. I mean, this guy's had one hell of a career. Really like this guy's had so many exciting fights, and even late into his career at 37, he's still a really quality, tough fighter, and I just don't believe some regional scrub coming off of 4 days notice has any chance to beat him. So I didn't even bother looking into it, and there's not props out for the fight either, so go ahead and move on from that one. Next fight, bantamweight division, Romious taking on Gaston Bolanos. Odds for this one have Romious as the favorite at minus 220. Bolanos coming back plus 185. So Bolanos is the other role player on this card. Bolanos was like an American Muay Thai fighter who, finessed his way into the UFC here. Not really sure how he did that. I think it was, probably just hiring the right management, but he not only got into the UFC, he got a really easy fight in his debut versus Aaron Phillips. And honestly, there's like a world where he lost that fight because I don't remember, I think it was the first and the third round. He ended really badly. It was like getting his back taken and getting mounted. I think he got taken down in all 3 rounds there. So Bolanos, as I mentioned, Muay Thai fighter. So his grappling is no good. And even his striking, he never really learned how to adapt his striking to MMA. I just don't think this guy is any good at anything related to MMA. Striking is his best attribute, but I'm not even sure he's going to get the better of the striking here because I just don't think he understands like the footwork and the space needed in MMA because he's so inexperienced. So Romious, one of the lower level fighters I saw get signed to the Contender Series this season, and I don't think he's super dangerous anywhere. I think he certainly has the ability to probably get this fight to the floor and stay in top position easily on Bolanos, but I really haven't seen anything impressive from his top game. So I kind of think this is going to be not the highest paced fight, and I like the fight to go over 1.5 rounds. Was surprised the total was even at that. It's 2.5 on some books, but it's minus 166 to go over 1.5 rounds on DraftKings, and I like that play there. I think neither of these guys are that good. Neither of these guys are very dangerous. I don't think we're going to see a lot of early finishes here. Maybe Romious gets him out of there in the later rounds, but even I believe Bolanos made it past one. Yeah, he made it past 1.5 rounds versus Marcus McGee, who is a so much more dangerous fighter on the feet, on the ground. I think he's the better grappler. He's the harder hitter. He's the better overall fighter than Romious. So I just think Bolanos should be able to make it past 1.5 here. And I think when they're on the feet, they're going to be kind of not really doing a whole lot. It's going to be a lot of space between them, the occasional strike. And I believe we'll possibly see a Romious decision here. So I like the fight going over 1.5. Moving on to the second of 3 female fights on the card. In the women's strawweight division, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, the absolute Babe, the legend, taking on Denise Gomes, the young gun. We have Carolina, unfortunately, a huge underdog here, rightfully so, probably. Gomes minus 500, Carolina plus 385 on the comeback. I mean, I think all you really need to look in this one is the age difference. Age is a big thing in MMA, and I think it's an even bigger thing in women's MMA. Sometimes we see, every now and then we see like a Rafaela Sunsao, who's like, gives a vet lesson to a younger guy because he's still old. He's old, but he's still really skilled, or Francisco Trinaldo or something like that. But in women's MMA, man, I think it's way, way less common. And I just don't see how Carolina is going to overcome the athleticism and the age difference here. I think Gomes, fucking UFC stats isn't letting me pull up the exact. I think it's 14 years between the two of them. Yeah, it's a 14-year age gap between these two. Gomes hits hard. She's not really easy to control for long stretches. I think Carolina's best bet is likely taking this fight to the floor. I just think that the power difference in the striking is going to be too much for Carolina to overcome. And if Carolina wants to have any chance of winning the fight, it is going to be with some takedowns. I don't think the props are out yet, but I would be maybe interested in seeing Carolina to get a takedown on the takedown props here, because I just think that she's going to, as I mentioned, be so outgunned and out-physicaled on the feet that she's going to be looking to take this fight to the floor, and she probably will hit a takedown, not really do a whole lot with it. But man, so this fight to end split is 330. I don't think that's good. That we see a lot more competitively lined fights around that same price, and I just think that this is going to be likely a UD for Denise Gomes here. The KO prop is plus 275 for Gomes. That's no good. I mean, the only woman to knock out Carolina, I believe, is Andrade. Yep. Yeah, so 24 pro fights, fought a lot of competition. The only woman to ever get her was Andrade. And Carolina can take a beating. That is one thing. She can absorb a lot of strikes. Grasso, Jan, Lucindo, all those women put, a hurting on her. And she still made it to the final bell versus all of them. So I think it will be a Gomes decision here, but I don't really see any way to play the fight. Moving on to the main card here, we are already there, have two fights in the Premier Division, and unfortunately Garbrandt versus Miles Johns fell off this card, and yeah, not a very exciting card of fights. Starting things off with Mansur Abdul Malik's UFC debut versus Duško Todorovic. Odds for this one have Malik as the minus 457 favorite, Todorovic coming back plus 357. So Malik is a great athlete, a young black. That's worth noting. Young black, up and coming prospect, and this guy's an athlete, man. I mean, you can clearly see that he's a great athlete. At only 3 years pro in MMA, you can see the guy's making big improvements. Comes from a wrestling background, and I just don't see him losing this fight. I used to think about fights. I used to kind of rush fading fighters. I'm trying to do better with that, and I think I have done better with it lately. So if we have this young, athletic, up-and-coming prospect, 6-0, knocked everybody out, would it make sense for him to lose his first MMA fight in the UFC? I don't think so. They clearly gave him one of the lower tier guys at middleweight, Duško Todorovic, who's coming off of multiple knee injuries. He blew his knee out versus Christian Leroy Duncan, and then when preparing for his next fight, he injured the knee again. I don't know if it was the same knee, but back-to-back knee injuries, not really a great sign, and I just don't think that Duško provides anything to really give Malik trouble. And Malik, as I mentioned, he comes from a wrestling background. He fought Wes Schultz, who was trying to take him down. Did a pretty good job stuffing the takedowns, getting up off the bottom there. I certainly don't think Duško is going to have any grappling success. And if Duško wants to win, it's going to have to be by knockout. And I think even though Malik's, his defense, his chin, he got rocked in his first pro fight where he looked, pretty uncomfortable after getting hit with the punch. It's still hard to believe that Duško is going to be the one to catch him on the chin and knock him out. And Malik went into round 2 for the first time in his last fight. I thought his gas tank looked fine for that as well. You got to question whether guys are going to be able to sustain their cardio when they've never gone out of the first round. And I think Malik did a pretty good job of it there. And I just see, Malik winning this fight likely by knockout in the first round or two, which is the most likely outcome here. I'll go with a round 2 knockout. And that's possibly the only betting angle I could see for the fight, is looking to play Malik by round 2, round 3 instead of round 1, hoping that Dushko is tough enough to absorb some strikes early. Maybe we get some grappling, some clinching to kill some time, and this one stretches into the second before Dushko gets finished. But yeah, I have no faith in Dushko, and I'm interested to see where Malik goes. Definitely seems like a promising young guy, and I think he gets through this first fight without much trouble. Moving on to the women's strawweight division, Luana Pinheiro taking on Jillian Robertson, possibly the best fighter in women's MMA right now, Jillian Robertson. Odds for this one have Jillian as big favorite, -375, Pinheiro +310. Tough one to call from a betting perspective, because I don't believe Jillian being near 80% is quite correct here, but also Luana seems to have a pretty limited window, and that would likely be an early window here, because Luana's cardio is no good. She runs out of steam the later the fight goes. Jillian can go all day. She seriously is an absolute grinder, and she'll just keep pursuing takedowns until she gets on top, or you either beat her up until she can't shoot anymore. And I just don't think that Pinheiro has the takedown defense, the discipline, the footwork, the striking to fend Robertson's takedowns off. I think eventually she's going to start getting toppled over and stuck on bottom, and she's going to be tired, and Jillian's going to be controlling her. And, I think Pinheiro really needs a first round knockout if she's going to win. And she is, somewhat dangerous in the first round. She is athletic, can throw some hard offensive strikes while she's fresh. But if you're relying on a women's MMA fighter to win by first round knockout, chances are they're not going to win. So her to win KO 2,300 odds. If you want to throw some action on Pinheiro at that prop, I wouldn't knock it. And even if you took some Pinheiro money line looking to fade her in the live lines, that does make sense to me. But I don't know, man. I just think that even though the prices are horrible on Jillian to win in the second and third round, I think that's just the only way to play the fight. She did just go the distance versus Michelle Waterson, who took an absolute beating there. But I think Waterson is tougher and more resilient than Pinheiro is. And I think that you got to go with just the 2-3 props. Jillian has a ton of round 2-3 finishes. I think, let's see, three of her last 4 UFC wins were round 2 finishes. So, I like the round 2-3 props, even though they're badly priced. You take some round 2 plus 350, you take some round 3 plus 750, and then you throw a little cherry on top with the Jillian Robertson by KO in rounds 2 or 3 at plus 1100. They have the sub line at plus 310 for sub 2-3. Sure, submission is more likely. The discrepancy between the KO and the sub makes the KO the worthy play there. And she did, just get a TKO over Poliana Viana not that long ago too. So if Pinheiro doesn't want to give up the neck, she doesn't want to get submitted, then Jillian will just pound her ass out. So I think it'll be a Jilly slow start into a finish in the second or third. So definitely look out for Jillian on the live lines there. And what a fucking disrespect to Jillian Robertson, who is, no bullshit, the best MMA fighter out of Canada right now, in respect to their own division, in respect to their recent success, and to Jillian Robertson seriously is the best Canada has to offer. They were just in fucking Canada, and now they put her on this Apex card. The disrespect will not be tolerated, and Jillian Robertson is just gonna have to finish another opponent and cash another check. So next fight, another Premier Division fight, the third and final on this card. A legendary matchup here between Gerald Meerschaert and Rene de Ridder making his UFC debut. Odds for this one have Rene de Ridder as the favorite, -300. Gerald Meerschaert coming back at +250. So de Ridder's coming over from ONE FC, a former champion over there. The guy has a little bit of name value. I swear, I don't think I've ever watched this guy fight until recently, and I just couldn't believe how badly he sucked. This guy sucks. I sent a tweet out about it a couple hours ago, but he honestly reminds me of Paul Craig, where he is a jiu-jitsu grappler, but his wrestling stinks, his striking stinks. He's not durable. He doesn't really like getting hit, and he tries to be like a striker. He tries to like throw some straight shots, a jab, a front kick up the middle, but he's an imposter. He doesn't actually know how to strike, and he's also 34 now too, and I just don't see any real upside to this guy. And being 75% over Gerald Meerschaert seems dead wrong. So when these guys are striking with one another, I don't think either is going to have success. But honestly, I think Gerald is the more comfortable striker of the two. Who has the better wrestling of the two? It's probably de Ridder, because Gerald doesn't really even attempt to stop takedowns. But I don't think de Ridder's wrestling is very good, and I don't think his top game is really good either. And he's made out submitting a lot of lower level guys. I think Gerald Meerschaert's his wins, his submission wins, his jiu-jitsu, they're all better than de Ridder's. And I just don't understand how, if this fight, it's destined to end up on the floor. And I just don't see de Ridder, his grappling skill, being good enough to warrant 75% over Gerald Meerschaert. There are some guys who have out-grappled Gerald Meerschaert. Christoph Jocko comes to mind. Dustin Stolfutz had some grappling success. But Jack Hermanson, badly out-grappled him back in the day. But, it's generally a bad idea to try to take the fight to the floor with Gerald, because his bottom game is tricky. He can hit some sweeps, some submissions. He can end up on top. And I don't know. I just think there's no way that Gerald at plus 250 here is a bad bet. Sure, he might lose this fight. Obviously, he's a plus 250 dog. But I just don't see like this fight being over and you thinking, oh man, de Ridder minus 300, that was a safe bet, a great bet. No, I don't think that's happening. So just throw a unit on Gerald here, hope for the best, and hope the more experienced, better grappler of the two can come out on top. And yeah, one more comparison between these two. De Ridder, if you watch the Malik fights, he started getting hit there, and he won it out. The guy hates getting hit. He doesn't have a good chin. He doesn't have good defense, and he kind of gives up once he starts getting hit, in my opinion. Gerald Meerschaert wants you to start hitting him. Gerald Meerschaert doesn't start fighting until he starts getting hit. And the amount of times this guy has gotten beat up early and come back to win the fight late is just remarkable. He did it in his last fight. He was literally a plus 900 underdog in the second round of that fight, and then he finished Edmund not too long later. And it helps that Edmund is an absolute bum, who is a quitter, but Gerald's resolve, his resilience in there is unmatched, and you can't handicap that bullshit right there. So Gerald Meerschaert, hopefully he ships this one. And we're on to the co-main event in the bantamweight division. Ricky Turcios, Bernardo-Sopaj. Odds for this one have Sopaj as the favorite, minus 360, Turcios plus 285. This has gotten a little out of hand. Sopaj had an okay UFC debut. That was really short notice there, and he won the first half of the fight really easily, out-grappling Vincius Oliveira, who is a skilled fighter, a really good athlete, and just a well-rounded fighter. So honestly, even though he ran out of steam and lost the second half of that fight and got viciously knocked out in that fight, I honestly think that was probably a pretty promising debut, all things considered. And Sopaj, I think, is going to take Turcios down and likely going to out-grapple him. Turcios' takedown defense, his bottom game, they both stink. But the guy has great cardio. He's scrambly. He's tough to hold down. And he's probably going to pop back up to his feet. He's going to make Bernardo work here. And I don't think Bernardo is just going to easily destroy him on the mat here. I think he will easily get the takedowns, but I wouldn't be surprised if Turcios, is pesky on bottom. He has some reversals. He gets up. He makes Sopaj work, and then I could see Turcios taking over in the second half of the fight. But before the fight, I see no reason to get involved on Turcios, because the guy, he doesn't hit hard. He's literally like a little boy with the way his physicality is in the cage. He doesn't hit hard. He can't stop takedowns. He's just a wimp. And I think Bernardo is likely going to make easy work of him while he's fresh. It's just a matter of can Bernardo sustain it for long enough to get the win, either by, I don't think he's going to finish Ricky, honestly. I think it'll probably be by decision. Probably a 29-28 where Bernardo wins the first 2 rounds with his wrestling, and then he's a little tired, but still clings on to victory in the 3rd round. So I just think Turcios is better live than pre. I don't see any way he's going to stop these takedowns early, and then you'll be able to get a better price on Ricky in the live window. Last thing I'll explore here is Ricky to win in the 3rd round. Let's see what those odds are. I'm sure it's a huge dog, like 2,400. Oh, nailed it, 2,400 exactly. So that if you had to take anything pre-fight, I think that would be the bet. So moving on to the main event in the welterweight division, Carlos Prates getting his first UFC main event, only 4 fights into his UFC career, taking on the perennial gatekeeper Neil Magny. Odds for this one have Prates minus 750, Magny coming back plus 550. So this fight, it makes sense, but it doesn't, right? So Prates in his last fight, after only 2 fights in the UFC recognized that this guy was an exciting striker. They gave him a great matchup in Li Jingliang, a tough but respected striker who was going to, be able to take a beating and to test Prates. And he didn't really test him, but he allowed Prates to style on him. And that was just a phenomenal performance. It was a wicked knockout. And it honestly gave Prates a huge boost. And I think that was brilliant matchmaking by the UFC. Brilliant placement on the card for him to kick off that pay-per-view in Australia. And I think they did a good job, putting Prates' name into, relevance right away. Now, they follow it up with putting him in the Apex against Neil Magny. Now, it does test him, right? Neil Magny is a perennial gatekeeper, as I said. Pretty much all the guys who have beaten him in the past 5 years are all really solid, top 10 fighters. But there's just no excitement behind this fight. The most exciting thing that could happen is obviously Prates fucking him up. But no one is interested in this fight from, wow, I can't wait to see how Magny tests Prates. No, the worst possible thing that could happen here is Magny winning this fight. So I just don't understand why they would go with this matchup. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So in terms of a bet for this one, I really think it's an unbettable fight from my perspective. If you had to do anything, it would have to be on the Magny side. But Prates, his striking is fantastic, right? He's laser quick, he's powerful, he has a great striking arsenal, and I think his cardio is really good as well. I don't see any reason to think that his cardio is going to be bad, even though he is a cigarette smoker. I think as long as his fight is standing, I think he's gonna, he could probably go all day at that pace. And Neil, we know how Neil wants to win. It's to clinch, to grapple, to knead the body, knee the thigh, use his size, wear on Prates against the cage. It's a terrible, fighting style for entertainment, but it's effective. But it's hard to imagine how Magny's going to really track him down early. I think Prates is his footwork, his striking, they're going to probably keep Neil off of him for a while. And I don't know. I just don't see Prates slowing down enough to where Magny can finally start clinching on him, wearing on him. And Prates comes from a Muay Thai background too, so he's no stranger to clinching, and he's going to probably be attacking with his own knees and elbows when the fight gets in the clinch. And I just don't see really Neil presenting much of a trouble. I hope Prates can knock him out early. I hope we don't get to see Prates style on Magny for a few rounds and then all of a sudden he's tired and Neil takes over with his clinching. That would be so boring. Even though he's like a plus 500 underdog and there is potential to, 5 times your money, fuck, man, I hope it doesn't happen. The only way I think I would be interested in playing the fight before it started is Neil 3-4-5. They're huge numbers like 45, 50, 55 to 1 or something like that. Just toss some tiny little bets on those, and you're basically banking on if Prates slowing down, Neil capitalizing, using his experience, his cardio, and finding a finish in the later rounds. But I see no reason to invest on Prates KO. I don't see any reason to get involved in Neal before the fight. The overs, I don't know, man. I just think that this is a very high uncertainty fight, but I'm not interested in betting on Magny at plus 500. Hopefully Carlos knocks him out early. Smokes a cigarette at the press conference afterwards. That would be epic. And, if matched correctly, man, Prates could be a star, man. This guy, he's extremely well-spoken, fluent in English. He's got, the tattoos on his head. He's smoking cigs. He has an exciting fighting style. He's knocking people out. This guy could be, a star, honestly. So hopefully he gets past this and they continue to match him on pay-per-views or put him in better spots. I like the fact he's getting a main event. Don't like the fact that it's Neil Magny. That'll do it for this one. I'm excited for these fights. Honestly, I'm interested in these, even though I don't have as many wagers in this one. We'll go top to bottom with the bets I officially endorse. The Romious-Bolanos over 1.5 at minus 166. Dixon ITD plus 275 and sub plus 1,000. I'll go ahead and stamp Blackshear sub at plus 450. Radtke sub plus 650. The Malik KO 2-3 props. Jillian 2-3 props along with her KO 2-3. GM3 moneyline. Ricky Turcios round 3. And that is it. The best money line on the card is the big dog, Gerald Meerschaert. And I'm excited for that one. That's probably my best bet on the entire card. He's going with a plus 250 dog. So hope everyone enjoys the fights. We got the Madison Square Garden card next week with Jones versus Miocic as the main event. And that card doesn't look too great, but we'll be back next week to talk about the bets regardless. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoyed the podcast, got some good information. Hope you all enjoy the fights and win some bets this weekend. I'll see you all before the next UFC event next week. Peace out, everyone.